So I'm joined by Emily Unity today. So thank you very much for making the time to do this. And I discovered your profile basically, I think you did another interview with someone on LinkedIn, and I thought I looked at what you've done, and it was just, I looked at your achievements in your website and all that sort of stuff, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And this is someone I've got to talk to. So do you want to maybe talk, maybe rather than me reading out a big extended bio of everything you've done, people can go to your website, emilyunity.com, to have a look. But do you want to talk about yourself first, or just introduce yourself regarding your lived experience and why you're passionate about mental health and mental illness?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joel. So my name's Emily. My pronouns are they, them. Honestly, getting involved in the lived experience space was kind of a accident, like a very happy one. I feel like I accidentally got involved in advocacy through being through very difficult experiences of my own. So I was first diagnosed with mental health challenges when I was about 12, 13, but I definitely don't think that was the first time that I experienced them. I grew up in a quite culturally diverse background. So my mum's a Vietnam War refugee. My dad's a Malaysian immigrant. And they both didn't really have the words for depression or anxiety or mental health in their languages. So yeah, grew up without any sort of mental health literacy, I guess. And help seeking was really discouraged, particularly within a white society. And I just didn't really know what to do when I first started struggling. And it's only been through really difficult experiences of first going through those types of things that I've managed to just get into the system and kind of had these less than ideal experiences, I guess. I think it's through those sorts of hard journeys that I've learned to actually meet people that understand me for who I am. And it's that sort of shared lived experience that I've found as being the most powerful thing for my hope and recovery. Medication and traditional therapies have definitely helped to an extent, but the main thing for me is that peer support and that shared lived experience. And that's what brought me to this type of work. So yeah, I've been volunteering in mental health since I was first diagnosed, so from around age 13. And now I work as a mental health professional and kind of designing services around how do we better engage with people with lived and living experience of mental health challenges from a variety of backgrounds, and kind of use our experiences to inform those service designs to make sure that things don't happen the way that they've happened to us. And we're really making sure that there's nothing about us without us.
Awesome. And you've also won a heap of awards as well. So I'm not going to embarrass you by reading them out, but I thought it was quite impressive. And I think there was one which was the mental health. Was it the Mental Health First Aid Australia one? MF?
Oh, yeah.
So you.
Yeah. I think particularly a lot of my mental health advocacy was within youth type work.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of youth awards within there because I think young people are really missed out of the mental health conversation a lot of the time.
Well, that's what appealed to me to talk to you about that, because that's what I noticed is I saw the youth stuff and I thought, wow, if I had a bit more courage or a bit more brains when I was younger, I would have done something similar. But a bit later on, I'm starting to do something. But in regards to what you've done, you said for the young people and that's where you've been really involved. So maybe you want to talk about at 12 or 13, did you, when you first had challenges, did you know what to call it, or what? How did you work that out? That was what was happening to you, or what was happening at the time?
Yeah. So honestly, I'd say the earliest memory that I have in terms of something that I would describe as symptomatic, if anything, was around age 6, where we were in class in school and we were taking turns reading out of a book. And I remember counting the number of people in front of me and determining which passage I was going to read and practicing that over and over and over in my head. And then I stuttered on a word, and I thought about it for the rest of the day and found it really hard to sleep for the rest of the week. But of course, that sort of stuff just really didn't get caught at the time. And I just went on to experience other things. So other things that didn't get picked up. So I was growing up in a very domestically violent household, had different experiences with eating disorders and struggled with my gender and sexuality. And it's only when I was 12 or 13 where I had this very big breakdown at school. It was very public. And that was after a really hard night at home. And I had struggled with physical health as well. So everything just kind of came to that sort of mask, that end where I dropped the mask. And if it weren't for that, I think I would have just still kind of kept pretending, I guess. I just felt like everyone else around me could just do everything and I couldn't. But everyone was expecting me to just kind of get on with it and be this quote unquote perfect human, or their idea of perfect. And it was just very tiring. And it only got to that crisis point where I was referred to the school psychologist and then referred to an external psychologist and then a psychiatrist, and kind of put within like different private and public systems, and going through that type of like general, I guess, more traditional journey of diagnoses. But yeah, if it weren't for that crisis end, I don't think I would have ever gotten the help that I needed. And I'm very thankful that people were able to pick that up at the time and refer me to the right people. But I think that's why I'm so passionate about youth mental health, is because so many of us go through these types of experiences and we all are sort of just pretending that everything's okay. And it's only until someone really notices and really questions it with like compassion and creates that safe space that we can open up about it and catch it early before it gets to that really pointy end.
Okay, so you had to have almost, as you said, you had that breakdown moment, and then other people got involved. And how was the system from your perspective once, from a 12 to 13-year-old, what was the process like, or what were you getting help with?
Honestly, like very overwhelming. Like coming from a background where, you know, I couldn't talk about my emotions generally, let alone like anything health wise, or mental health was even more stigmatized, like within the community that I was growing up in. It was horrifying, I guess, like within the culture that I grew up in as well. Like you're either quote unquote normal or quote unquote possessed. And I thought that there was something really, really wrong with me, and I was never meant to get better. And I had been like labeled with like this diagnosis, and that was going to define the rest of my life. And I think it was something that, you know, wasn't just me making up in my head. There were a lot of like discussions around it as well. Like people around me were worried about my career, and I'm 12 at this point, like I'm still in junior school. I'm really worried about like the rest of my life being determined by everything that's happening in this one moment. But I think as like I was sort of given to different psychologists who just didn't seem to really understand different parts of my journey, because I wasn't able to explain it because I didn't have the language. It was just really hard, like going from place to place, feeling like I was the thing that was broken, because if I didn't fit into their mold, then I must be the problem. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, is that young people are not the problem. The system is just really quite fragmented, and people don't get the help that they need, and they don't get the right like connection to the pathways that they need to seek. And it's only through like really a lot of perseverance and trying out different things that you actually get to this point where you find out what works for you. And what worked for me was, well, a mix of things, but it was really like a big catalyst is finding peer support and finding that shared experience. And for me, that really motivated me to think, hey, what else haven't I tried? Like these people are saying like all these various other things have helped them. Maybe I'm not the problem. And maybe if I don't fit into this, like if I don't suddenly feel better after this 1 hour session talking in a room, then there's something not inherently wrong with me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, what was your family's reaction to this? So I have had I've had a lady on, Zoe Carr, we talked to me about the multicultural side of mental health. I don't think it's something that's talked about or thought about a lot. So in regards to your background and obviously the cultural differences with mental health and that sort of thing, how was that, or do you want to recall that sort of moment?
Sure. Honestly, so I can't claim what it's like to be a raw refugee at all. Like I grew up in Australia where my parents had already immigrated as teenagers. And so I grew up speaking English as a first language, but being around like predominantly white people and going to a very privileged school, I didn't really see any people that really looked like me. So I felt just quite disconnected from everything. Like I was too Asian to fit in, but too white to fit into my parents' cultures as well. And I think like there's a lot of intergenerational trauma that happened from there. And there's a lot of pain that they weren't supported with as well. Like my mum escaped the Vietnam War when she was 13. And she didn't understand what trauma was until I started going through therapy for my PTSD. Like that is a wild concept to me. And I think like that sort of generational distilling of like understanding of mental health just really passed on to me, and it was something that I really wanted to work on to make sure that I didn't pass it on to anyone else as well.
Now, so you mentioned their PTSD, and I think it's something that's not talked about enough. So do you want to talk about PTSD and the treatments available? Because I think most people have some sort of traumatic event in their life, whether it be death of a family member, they've seen something, whatever it is, and it's something that not, you know, we just tend to think of maybe only war veterans or people like that who get PTSD, but maybe you want to talk about your perspective on PTSD and the help you got for that, and actually how that helped you move forward and have a better life.
Sure. Honestly, I think I didn't really understand the sort of signs of my PTSD until I was diagnosed with it. I think, so when I was 12, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, which I think is like a very standard sort of combo to be diagnosed with for some reason. And then like as more and more diagnoses came on, I just kind of felt more and more tired. And I got worried that like, you know, when is this going to end? And I felt like each label was like a heavier thing. And PTSD was for me was like one of the harder ones to get through because that's what I had known it as, you know, like something that like war veterans had gone through. And that I felt this huge imposter syndrome being like, what I've gone through is nowhere near like what some people have gone through. Like I can't, I felt like I wasn't deserving of this diagnosis or the help that came with it. But I think as I've become a lot more okay with myself and my recovery journey, I've learned that it's something that is actually, there's a lot of oddly strengths within that as well. Like there's strengths within each label that I've been given and each experience I've gone through, even if they're really challenging. Like PTSD is something that for me, like I will go into situations, I will get triggered, but I know how to handle them now. It's not something that I feel like I'll ever get over, but it's something I manage. And the strengths that have come from that is that I'm able to connect with other people through their sort of shared trauma. And I think that connection of shared experience is something that's so unique to people that have only lived through that. It's so odd to see it in such a positive light now when it was something that I just really feared earlier on. And I couldn't accept about my own identity. But I think now the trauma that I've gone through, it doesn't define me, but I manage it on a daily basis. And it's something that I can see, like, I can see the connection and the strength in it. And it wasn't the trauma that made me stronger. It was what I did with it and like being proud of yourself within that.
Okay. Well, when you say manage it, how do you manage it? Like what's some advice for managing PTSD? Because I think it's a big problem. I think a lot of people's circumstances in their life, let's say if they're into alcohol, drugs, whatever they do, right, it's up to them. But I think a lot of it, most people could trace it back, or it could be traced back to some sort of event or incident, something from childhood or whatever it is. It goes unresolved and it goes into all these behaviors, right? So maybe you can talk about how you deal with your PTSD in regards to what are some things that you've done or what helps you with that? Honestly,
for me, like it's a really big mix of things. Like I've been through very traditional type therapies. There's a lot of talk therapy that have come with PTSD type training. There's also there's this one that I tried actually like last year because something happened particularly around like domestic violence last year, and I tried a new type of trauma therapy, and I have to say like I wasn't quite sold on it conceptually even after like so much time in therapy. But there's this thing called EMDR, which is like they wave this like light or a finger in front of you, and it kind of like tricks your brain into thinking like this is a safe place. Like you can relive the memories without them having them like rule your life going forward. And I think like that's something that was really powerful. And I started learning like different strategies, whether they be creative or grounding. So like I have these anxiety rings that I spin all the time. And they definitely kind of like sensorily bring me back to the moment and think like, what is actually happening right now? Like, how old do I feel in this moment? Am I reacting to what's happening now? Or do I kind of feel reminded of something that's before? I think being really aware of the situation and your triggers and what you can do about it is the main thing. For me, like most of my trauma has kind of come from places that I feel entirely out of control. I feel like frozen in place. I feel like I can't do anything about it. But I know that like now if I get triggered, that's not the circumstance anymore. I have these strategies. I feel a lot more empowered to actually control my own narrative. And I don't feel weak anymore, which is like just such a fantastic feeling to kind of celebrate the recovery that you've gone through, and that each trigger that you go through, you can manage it a little bit better every time.
I think it's very impressive and very admirable that you're so self-actualized to actually have things like anxiety rings and you've got all these things in place. Like a lot of people probably wish they do, but they don't have the, not saying the courage, but they don't have the maybe self-actualization, or well, let's use the word courage to not do that. So I think it's very courageous, and you've got obviously very good self-actualization to actually know that, because a lot of people probably don't, and they probably need to, right?
Yeah, I honestly think like it's like lack of knowledge and resources. Like I've been so lucky to, well, obviously there's a lot of work that's gone into it as well, but I've also been very lucky to meet the right people and have the right things around me that I have access to those sorts of things. I think that's why it's so important to like really increase our knowledge of mental health literacy, that it's so much beyond like one-to-one talk therapy, that it's beyond just medication, and that we can have like and create healing everywhere that we go. Because for me, like healing from trauma is not just within those one-to-one sessions. Like I walk out of there and I might see something on the street and I'll need help. And I think it's, what can I do in that moment? How can I be there for myself when other people aren't there? Like it's, yeah, creating healing everywhere is such a wild journey, but it's such a fulfilling one.
Let's talk stuff. Well, what is out there for people beyond, let's say, talk therapy you've just mentioned? Well, and you mentioned the was it EMDR? What else is there out there for people?
I think for me, like possibly the biggest healing is peer support, and I think it's just kind of the realization. You know, people say it's okay to not be okay all the time, but I think that there's still a lack of kind of visibility of people who are actually showing that they're not okay and demonstrating and role modeling that real vulnerability. And I think that comes through peer support. For me, like meeting someone that's really real with me about their experiences and seeing with them like, oh my gosh, they're not, you know, just telling me that I can cry on their shoulder or something. Like they're happy to cry on mine too. It's mutual, it's reciprocal. And I feel like they're really human and they're really real about who they are. I think that's something that I wish I had a lot more when I was younger, was everyone just kind of felt impenetrable. Everyone felt like they were doing everything brilliantly. And no one was kind of demonstrating vulnerability. And when I found that, it was really foreign to me, but it gave me the permission to just be real about what I was feeling in that moment. Like I definitely have my stronger moments, but there's such strength in vulnerability as well. Like that peer support's a very big deal for me. And then on the other side, just lots of creative stuff. Creative things have just been such a fantastic outlet for me in terms of finding expression or ways to deal with things that are not necessarily like with words. I'm autistic, so like words don't come to me supernaturally all the time. But sometimes I much prefer like to sing it, or I'll play some music, or I'll draw. The main thing is like that I don't have to fit into like one particular mold or a traditional way of expressing myself. It's kind of whatever I want to do.
Well, you're extremely creative, and anyone can look at your website, emilyunity.com, and see that. But you mentioned you're autistic, so you're neurodiverse. I've had another lady on, Rachel Worsley, who's neurodiverse as well, and we talked about it. So maybe you want to talk about how autism, or how that relates to lived experience and mental health.
Sure. So this is only a more recent... Oh, I'm sorry about my...
You're right. No problem.
Doorbell. So this is only a more recent diagnosis, maybe about like 4 or 5 years ago. And it's so odd. I definitely shouldn't have a kind of like favorite diagnosis, but definitely the ones around neurodiversity are the ones that are most... They have the most strengths, I think, and the most like different ways to see things. For me, like finding other neurodiverse people is just... it's so healing. And the conversations that you can have with them, the way that people's minds work is just, it's so beautiful. I've loved learning about my neurodiversity and seeing that like the way that my brain works is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that that's what I've been told, like since I've been really young, is like, I wasn't the stereotypical, because I also have ADHD. I think if you think about stereotypical ADHD, you picture like a young boy in class, like not being quite unruly, but I was super obedient. And a lot of that was masked by the autism and the anxiety. And I think like a lot of the punishments that I was given in terms of like, oh, you're being weird for thinking that way, or like slurs and stuff like that, are now strengths for me. Like being able to, so I have synesthesia, which means that like, which means that like if I hear music, then I can see some colors sometimes. And I think like seeing that as like for the beauty that it is, rather than something that makes me weird or worse, it's so empowering. I love being able to like connect with different minded people, and be able to like bring things together and like problem solve in ways that are unique to each of us. I think that's the best thing for me, is like I love meeting such different people, and the differences that I have are not bad anymore. And I think I just spent so much of my life thinking that everything that made me different was worse, but it's not. It's a strength. It's opportunity.
Well, I think that's the key to it, is what you've done is you've created a massive amount of strength. Obviously, you've got very successful in a lot of different fields, and that's where your creative scripts come out. And I'll say to people again, check out your website, emilyunity.com, and you can see everything there. It's a great website, and it's, you know, all the different things you do. It's very, very impressive as well. But I was going to say, in regards to your role as a lived experience co-designer, or you do design?
Yeah.
What does that entail, or what do you do in regards to that?
Sure. So when I graduated from school and went to uni, I was still sort of kind of playing, I guess, the role that my parents wanted me to play. So I became a software engineer and was just very skilled in like project management and stuff like that. But all the time I was like volunteering mental health in the back end. And I kind of did the flip a bit more recently where I'm doing mental health on the front end. And part of that is like doing not just peer work and one-to-one type therapies and group therapies, but also building programs and platforms in a sustainable way that really embeds lived and living experience in service design. Because I think a lot of the reason why I've had like less than ideal experiences, a lot of the reason why my peers have as well, is because our voices are not represented in decision-making that actually affects us. And I think that's because there's a lack of kind of opportunities for us to create that space and for us to really give meaningful input. So one of my jobs at the moment is with the Royal Children's Hospital. So I'm working to embed lived and living experience in their different services. And that sort of looks like establishing a network of people that have different experiences of mental health challenges and recovery, whether that be young people or carers. And they come and they share their experiences and say, hey, this is what it was like for me. Here's how we can do a bit better. And I think that it's only through that consistent co-design and involving voices that actually experience those services that we can make them improve.
Okay, cool. So with that, so you get the people telling off their experiences. So with the co-design, what changes have already been done, or what's the changes you're seeing in regards to these services that are being provided based on that information?
Sure. So for me, like there's kind of like two sort of segments of change. First is for the people of lived and living experience that are involved in that. I think like there's so much healing and hope that comes from it. And it's really empowering to kind of see, I've been through these really difficult experiences, but I have the power, the agency, the opportunity to create change and make sure that this doesn't happen for other people. And whenever you talk to people like that, like myself included, a lot of us are doing it for like the people that we care for, or for like younger versions of ourselves. And it's so healing to be able to be provided that opportunity and to be able to connect with other people as well. And then the other sort of half of it is for like the clinicians and the staff in the organization. And there are lots of like tangible things that make it really easy to argue for like the use of lived experience in terms of like there's reduced need for their services, there's reduced like rehospitalization, there's reduced like need for restrictive practices because people are actually involved in the service design. But there's also like the optimization of their resources. A lot of healthcare professionals are really passionate about helping people and have the means to do so, but then it's often funneled in a slightly off kilter way. Like it's not quite on the mark because they don't have that input. And I think like being able to actually target that meaningfully is really, really powerful because everyone just kind of wants to help us in the end. And then finally, like something that I just love so much is the culture change around like reduction of stigma around lived experience, because it's not just like a dichotomy between the clinicians and the people seeking help. It's also like the clinicians accepting lived experience within themselves and within their own work culture, because a lot of health clinicians have lived experience, but it's often like it's not been accepted historically to speak about your own experience. You kind of have to be the perfect healer. You have to be well enough to help someone else. But I think being really real about that and say like, oh, okay, I can actually use my experience to inform how I treat other people. I'm trauma informed just by my own experience is actually quite valid. I think like that culture around, clinicians speaking up about the experiences that they've been through and how hard it is for them is what can really change to the service as well and the sector widely. So I really love the culture change that's happening because, you know, it's kind of, it's shifting power in terms of who is the expert in the room, because traditionally there is experts by profession, like clinicians and academics and researchers, and then there's experts by experience, the lived and living experience that's coming into it. And we're creating partnerships between the two, and it's just the most wholesome conversations. I'm so privileged to be a part of it, and I think that's a lot of the reform that's happening at the moment.
Okay, so with the reform that's happening at the moment, what do you see in the space of? So I focus a lot of people who had a parent with a serious mental illness. So, what's sort of the reform that you see happening, or what is the stuff that is going to be happening in regards to, let's say, young carers or children who have a parent or a family member with a serious mental illness?
I think particularly for like that younger age bracket, and for like young carers. So I identify as a young carer as well, but I wasn't familiar with that language until more recently. I think like that there's so much stuff that's been completely missed in the past. Like often if say like your parent has a mental illness or your sibling does, they're often the main focus of everything that's happening, and you get kind of lost along the way or dragged along. And then it's only when you're older or you have actually more time and space that you're able to reflect. And there's a lot of grief in that, and kind of recognizing what you could have done better, what could have been done better for you. I think what's really amazing now is that we're able to tackle it as it's happening. So we don't have to design in hindsight. We're proactively designing, and we're changing the system from being a crisis-focused and crisis-driven sector to something that's more continuously getting better at actually helping people that are experiencing the issues right now. We're not basing our knowledge on like literature that was conducted in a study like 20 years ago. It's people on the ground living their experiences right now and creating programs themselves that help people just like them. There's this fantastic initiative that I have been very privileged to be a part of, where we partnered with a group of young carers and like help them express their journeys in this really creative piece with an artist. And so the artist listened to their stories, and over a series of workshops produced these artworks where it shows what it's like to be a young carer and their experiences, and the little bits that are like tied to individual parts of their stories. And it's through like those sorts of creative expressions that really raise awareness of what people are like in those sorts of scenarios, because not many people know what a young carer is unless you're really in this space like you and I are. And I think like through that sort of creative expression and awareness raising, it's that co-design that can spread more and more awareness and bring us all into this conversation. Because as far as I'm concerned, if we define lived experience as either personal experience of mental health challenges and recovery or supporting someone with their experiences, I don't know anyone that isn't a person with lived and living experience. I think we're all affected by mental health, and we all deserve to be involved in the conversation about how do we improve it.
Absolutely. And what's your experience as a young carer then? Or did you ever view yourself as a young carer? Was it something where, like, I never called myself a young carer. I didn't really, I still don't really use that term for myself, but what was your experience with it, and how did you come to call yourself a young carer?
Yeah. So I was caring for someone in my family, and I think like the thing is, particularly within the culture that I was raised in, like being the older sibling was something that was just expected of me to do. Like I was the older sibling, but I was also like the older femme presenting sibling. So I was identified as female at the time. So older sister. And I think like that was meant to be something that was expected of me, I guess. I didn't think that I was a carer. I didn't think that I was doing something that was outside of my role, or I thought other kids had to do the same things as me. It was only until I really got involved in this space and I learned about that term that I looked into it a little bit more and said, oh, wow, that sort of happened to me too. And it's pretty wild. I think like it's a passion area of mine, because I think there's a lot of kind of gaps in our knowledge. Like when you think about people that care for people with mental health difficulties, you often think of either clinicians or biological parents, but you miss like so many other people in that equation. You miss the supporters and the carers that are not traditional, I guess. And it's systemic, I guess, in terms of how you can heal a mental health journey. You have to bring everyone along with you, and you have to involve everyone with that. So interrogating like, who are the people around you, who's looking around you, is something that I wish happened to me. But it's nice now that at least within the Royal Children's Hospital, we're involving a lot of young carers in the design. And it's young carers, not just siblings, but people that also care for like the other family members or friends as well. And we're kind of changing the definition about what it means to be someone that looks after someone else without having to just be a parent.
Well, I think, Emily, the important thing for people to realize is that the child who's in that situation is the person who's affected generally by the most, because it's your parent and they're responsible for raising you. So you're affected by their mental health or their mental illness, whether they're manic, depressed, whatever, the most. Plus, in regards to suicide prevention, you're really the first person, or if there's multiple children or whatever, you're the first, you know more about that person than the psychiatrist will, or the psychologist will. external parties, whatever. So you're really affected the most. Yet I get the sense that I don't think we will ever, or you were ever included really by anyone who was treating, let's say, with your parents or your loved ones in the whole thing. So maybe you want to talk about your perspective for people rather than hearing from me, from you, about how you're the first person there. You're the one who's most affected by the larger gamut of mental health in the home.
100%. Like, I think the kind of term first responders is something that applies to young carers, like children, siblings, but also teachers and stuff like that, and co-workers as well. It's people who, like, you can get triggered or you can have a moment anytime, anywhere. And it definitely, at least for me, it tends to happen outside of the 1 hour appointments rather than within them. And I think I don't know, I hope that the services that we're currently implementing, the projects that we're working on that through co-design, I hope that in the future when they're implemented, we actually can include other people in that care. And so when you're asked, like, what can help you in the time now, you know, like, we also build a mental health literacy for the people around them in their daily lives too. So, like, suicide prevention training is not just important for clinicians, but it's also important for a best friend or a parent or a cousin or a teacher or a colleague. It's really important that a lot of us have that mental health awareness and have these conversations so we know each other best, and what can we do to help you in the times that, you need it the most. And I think for me, I really wish that I was a part of those conversations a lot more, because you just feel really powerless if you don't understand, if you've just been left out of conversations and you don't have the language or the knowledge or the resources to take care of someone that you care about, and then afterwards take care of yourself too. Like, there's just so much vicarious trauma that happens for carers. And I think, like, within the network that I coordinate, there's a lot of historically in lived and living experience. It's kind of like a difference between, or a separation between, like, personal experience versus care experience. But for me, like, there's a huge overlap. Like, in the network that I have, which has like near 1,000 people now, it's about 80% of overlap between both parties. And I think that's because carers often have their own experiences, whether that be before or after their caring experience, but they're not separate. And I think it's important to really emphasize that, is that the carers need support too for their own well-being, and they're not just a supporting role in someone else's story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you want to talk about that network is that your network you've established, the 1,000-person network? Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that and what it does?
Yeah. So I owe a lot of it to my boss, who is this absolutely brilliant woman. She first established a campus mental health strategy at the hospital, and it's something that is making sure that mental health is everyone's business and not just people who present to the hospital just for mental health difficulties, but everyone kind of gets assessed for it. So if you come there with a broken leg, or you come there in terms of like cancer treatment, you're making sure that everyone's kind of assessed of, hey, how are you going today? Mental health is still a priority for you. And I think that historically has not been done. A really big part of that is the involvement of people with lived and living experience. And that's where I came on board and just helped establish this. In terms of like getting people in, we had to establish a pathway for them to actually engage with us and for us to engage meaningfully with community. And it's part of like that network that we're building at the moment. And if we have opportunities within the campus or within the hospital, we send them out to the network and say like, hey, we're looking for advisors within this project. Like, please apply if you're interested. And then people can apply, and then we get that sort of engagement that way. And it's something that I'm constantly wanting to work on, because the network is so ever growing, but there are limited opportunities at the moment, but those are growing too. I think the resistance that the hospital and most like clinical places have had to lived and living experience engagement is that they're just not used to it. It's something that's really new, and it's a really, really big shift in power. And I think through that culture change that I was talking about earlier, like, it's so small, but in the meetings where they have lived and living experience advisors, you can see clinicians like really wanting to connect with them and really wanting to connect with themselves as well, and celebrating lived and living experience in such small ways. And I think it's going to actually change the entire way that we look at like what expertise looks like at the hospital. And I think there's just going to be more and more opportunities as we go on. I'm really hoping for it to not be like such a separate network, which it is at the moment, like just going through my team. But I hope it to be something that's just really integrated to the hospital, where it's just part of everyday type work, not the people that, kind of stop and say, oh, we should have someone with lived and living experience here. It's just something that's expected. Every meeting, every team will have something that's informed by lived and living experience. And it's just going to, be completely normal.
That's great to hear. Now, I want to ask you about the system itself now. So in regards to mental health awareness movement, which is happening, everyone knows mental health is an issue, right? So we know it's an issue where there's awareness, there's charities left, right, and center promoting it, right? What to you needs to happen next beyond this, let's say, surface level awareness where we all know it's an issue? What do you see that needs to happen next?
I think there's such amazing initiatives such as, like Are You OK Day and a lot of awareness raising days. And like you said, we're aware that mental health, one, exists and two, is quite prevalent. But I think there's still a sort of lack of real representation of our stories and real spaces where we can learn how to express our stories. Like I only really learned this sort of literacy and how to speak about my experiences through speaker workshops, like very dedicated, specific training. And I think if that was more available to the public, then we could just talk generally about how we're experiencing life in a really safe way. I think that's what's important is like, one, we're allowed to speak about what we're going through, but two, how do we do it in a way that's safe for us and safe for the people that are listening to it? I think that's the main kind of barrier right now, is that we know that like most of the people that we know are probably experiencing mental health difficulties, but how do we actually communicate about that? We don't have the supports to go further than the just, are you okay? Or the, are you really okay? It's how do we actually navigate that system together? How do we seek support together? How do we have each other's backs through a day-to-day basis? And I think it's the step after awareness that is really difficult. It's the action taking and it's the interrogation with curiosity and compassion that not many people have the skill or resources to do. So I hope that through kind of people that go through these types of trainings and get more familiar with the language, such as lived and living experience, that we can just start these little ripple effects and go out in communities and start raising more awareness that way. But through like upskilling people and empowering them that their voice is important. It's not just awareness, like they're part of this. And this movement's something that can be really healing for them too.
Awesome. But what about from the actual, let's say the hospital services, right? So up until, my mum passed away at the start of the year, but up until then, I've been involved in dealing with hospitals, psych wards, all that sort of stuff, right? So for me, there's a real lack of the funding that is getting allocated that doesn't actually go into the physical. You need physical places. You need more mental health nurses. You need a pain better, these sorts of things. So from your perspective, going beyond the top level stuff, from the actual services side, the real life services, what do you see needs to happen from your experience?
So, well, firstly, I'm sorry to hear about your mum and thank you for sharing that with me. But I think like one of the biggest things I'm seeing slowly, at least at the mental health service level, is this thing called transformation. And at least in Victoria, part of the Royal Commission into Mental Health was rolling out transformation among the main mental health service areas. And a really big chunk of that is implementing lived and living experience workforces. And so that's peer work is one of the main branches of that. And I think through that peer work is something that I'm extremely biased on and that I just love to pieces. But I think like at the moment within our hospital, we can see family peer workers being rolled out. So they are people who have experience being family members or carers or supporters of their young people, and they help other people who are currently going through that service with their experiences. And that sort of embedding of a whole new workforce into those services is something that has just had the most amazing effect. And it's only in one ward at the moment, but I'm seeing that like that being a sort of demonstration of how important this is. And it's not just important for the peer workers or the people who are using the service, but also for the other clinicians in terms of their understanding of mental health and well-being. And that being implemented sort of, once you have one model and you demonstrate that it works well at one service, you can really easily implement that elsewhere. And I think that that's something that I'm seeing is just such great potential. I'm really keen for that to be normalized. And so for everyday services to involve peer work and that to be like a much more broader sector-wide change. At the moment, like I'm seeing that implemented at two of the hospitals that I work at, but it's something that's entirely statewide in Victoria at least. And I think that the other hospitals in other states will catch on as well.
Yeah, and there's also community-based services like that. Like my mum used to have a service called Wellways, and Wellways was basically people who had mental health challenges themselves. They might have bipolar or schizophrenia or whatever, and they would have a role, it might be a part-time job, for example, but they would go and take out people or go meet with people who were on the NDIS, for example, who had my mum had bipolar, but they had bipolar or schizophrenia, or take them out for a day or just go have a coffee with them, that sort of stuff, right? And it works both ways. It gives that person a job and some purpose, and it's also good for the person as well that they're not getting a random psychologist or caseworker to come to their house. They're getting someone who's more of a friend, but he can just be there, and they can have that instant level of respect because they both know what's going on in regards to their mental health challenges.
Yeah, I think the non-clinical support is so huge, and having to be able to connect with someone that's your equal is really rare within help seeking. It completely changed the game for me, and it has changed it for a lot of my peers as well. I think that sort of community type partnerships is something that I hope to see a lot more, because I don't think that we can just clone mental health professionals or make more services necessarily. I think it also involves a lot of services kind of having humility and saying, this is where our expertise sort of stops. We provide the clinical services, we can provide inpatient units and stuff like that. But if you want to go and heal through, say, religious healing, or say through culturally specific healing or other things like that, we can refer you and create partnerships meaningfully so that we don't just handball you to another service, but we create that relationship and really walk you through that whole pathway. That's something that I'm seeing a lot more of. And I hope that we have a much more integrated system, because at the moment, mental health is so separate to a lot of other things, whether it be physical health, whether it be homelessness or employment or alcohol and other drugs. But really, we're all those types of things affect our well-being. And I think those meaningful partnerships within clinical and non-clinical services can really make just help seeking a lot easier. As someone that seeks help, being able to just present somewhere and say, hey, here's what I'm experiencing, and not having to be handballed and just being led in one direction would be a brilliant change. Yeah,
I agree with you. I mean, you said us a couple of really good points there, which I want to hammer on or ask you more about. I love that word you said about humility with the services, because I don't think, from my experience, I was treated with a lot of disregard by psychiatrists and psychologists treating my mum. And I love that how you said that humility. So you think the profession's starting to be a bit more humble in regards to, hey, we don't know everything about this person. We can, obviously, if they come with us bipolar or schizophrenia, we know there may be certain things, but the actual person who lives with them will be more an expert on the subject than us, really. So do you see that sort of attitude coming around now? Or?
Absolutely. Yep. I definitely see it from it's really wild. I'm still a young person, and I can't really imagine what it would be like to be some of the clinicians that I work with. There's psychiatrists who have a million different postnominals and letters after their name. They've worked for X number of years in different universities all across the world, different hospitals. They have such specific and brilliant expertise. But if I were in that position and then I was told that I had more gaps in my knowledge, and someone would come into the room that was younger and didn't have any letters after their name, it would be kind of uncomfortable, not necessarily bad, but just different. So that's the extent that I can sympathize with that. So I think to have someone in that position that I see on a daily basis constantly ask for more and say hey, I actually don't know what it's like to live with someone. What is it like for you? That sort of acknowledgement of their own limit of their experience and willingness to learn more is massive. I think I just see that on a daily basis from some clinicians who were initially very, very reluctant to engage with people like me, people with lived and living experience, because we're the help seekers. We're not the experts in the room usually, but I think them willing to learn and them willing to shift that power over to us and hand decision making to us sometimes is unbelievably, it gives me so much hope. I've seen some of the most quote unquote, this is their words, not mine, the clinicians' words. They call themselves a crusty old clinician, and now they're just really enjoying engaging with us, because the depth of our experience, it's not something that can just be read in a book. It's something that has to be lived through, and it's only through our own expressions that people can learn from that. And I think there's just such diversity in all the different things that people like us have lived through. And it's, through conversations and relationships that we can learn from each other and partner together to build the future.
Well, I definitely think, Emily, that you raised that there's always been a barrier for whatever reason. A psychologist might think I'm completely out of school here, but I've got the sense, this is my perspective, there's always been a barrier between treating psychiatrist or psychologist, patient, and then family or extended people who know the person really, really well, right? There's always been that barrier. There's never been, we're going to treat you all together. It's always been, that's our patient. We don't really care about you. That's from my perspective, right? So are you saying from your experience now that you've started to see a change regarding psychiatrists or psychologists in regards to involving those people more willingly from your perspective?
Absolutely. Like I think many of us have, when we go through difficult experiences and then learn that it could have been better, the initial reaction might be sadness or guilt, but I think there's also a level of anger sometimes. And I think when you get involved in advocacy, you can get pretty angry and just be like, here are all the injustices, like why aren't these being addressed? And I was definitely like that for a really long time. And I kind of joined like this small segment of the lived and living experience community where like it's easy to blame a psychologist or psychiatrist and say like, why didn't you do this better? But I think acknowledging that they're human, acknowledging that we're all on this learning journey and we all have gaps in our knowledge and that it's human to kind of not like to admit when we're wrong. That was something that I've really had to go through in terms of my advocacy and personal and professional journey. And now seeing that there are so many clinicians that are so willing and ready, and like, it's not just willing and ready, but they're excited and passionate about changing the way that we do things. It's so motivating. I really wish that like, this is something that I wish this is something that I knew earlier on, because I think it's like the disenfranchised people who feel really disempowered, who like can't see an opportunity or resources or chance to get better or to make a change. But now I'm among people that like, they are the traditional power holders and they're stepping back and letting new people in, people with lived and living experience, people who are really young and have just been like seriously disempowered, like people that were like me, and I'm seeing it happen right now. I think that that's something that is just so motivating for me in the work that I do. And I know that the system will get better the more people there are like that. Yeah. I'm not saying that every clinician psychiatrist is like that, but I think that everyone has the opportunity and the chance to be like that. And I've definitely seen a lot of people demonstrate that. They're just fantastic to work with.
That's great to hear. You mentioned something before as well I want to go back to, which is integration of services. Now, a lot of people might not know what that means or how that affects. And you said some really good stuff regarding the wellness, the totality of wellness, like, nutrition and stuff like that. So maybe you want to talk about from your perspective, how would integrated services work? Let's say, for example, someone's got a serious mental health challenge and it's obviously there's a psychiatrist involved or a psychologist. But in regards to how would other services, or how would you see that relating or working together?
Yeah. So for me, what the ideal, so this is like, infinite money and resources. If someone wanted to seek help, they would present somewhere or look online and they would kind of just be asked this open question of like, what would you like help with? Or at least like, what do you not want help with? I think like we know what we don't want help with a lot of the times more than we do with what we want. But and then a service be able to identify like, here's what we can help with, here are your options, and kind of presenting it in like a menu type setting, and then be able to say, here are some other services that can help you and how can we help you get there. That is something that I wish I had from the very beginning. It's only something that I know now, like being very embedded into the system. But I think being really clear about what's available is really important, because as help seekers, we often feel like it's scary seeking help. You don't know whether you're going to get the right help. You don't know whether there is help available. And often if you do go down a certain pathway, it's the only pathway that you know. And I think just knowing that there are other options available and knowing like, here's how we can refer you to someone better is really important. What came to mind when you asked me that question visually is there's this Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander social and emotional wellbeing wheel, and it has like different segments there. And I definitely don't identify with all of it because I'm not First Nations, but there's parts of the wheel that like go into connection to like kin and connection to country and connection to like different parts of yourself, as well as things like food and employment and study. And I think like checking out each of those different kind of sectors of well-being or how they might intersect is really important, rather than just kind of asking someone an overall question of like, how are you feeling, or what do you want help with, or going through a specific diagnosis type route. We need to be more like holistic with our understanding of mental health and well-being. And I think providing those specific questions about how you're going in this area of your life, is this important to you? Because, you know, not all of us weigh employment or anything else as the same weight. That is a way that I think we can actually really identify what matters to each individual person and get them the help that they need, not the help that we think that they need.
Yeah, it's a really, really great answer, Emily. And I just want to hit on that point for people, because let's say, for example, if you have mental health challenges, most traditional remedies, you either call a number or you'll go to the GP right, for a referral. And all too often I hear from friends that they're really eager to give them antidepressants, or that's it. There's no really attempt, as you said, to find out more, you know, what's going on. Is there a relationship breakdown? Are you doing work that you find purposeful, or is there something unresolved from your childhood for whatever reasons come up again? Like all these sorts of things, right? So we seem to just go to that, you know, antidepressants, or here's your medication and away you go.
Yeah, it's so restrictive, the current model, I guess. Like there are definitely some... So the strength that I see within diagnoses, because I went and got some psychological training and did my postgrad in it, I think there's strength in terms of if you diagnose someone, there are different pathways of treatment that are like proven to work for people who have those types of symptoms. That is one thing, but like it might not be the totality. It won't fix everything. It's like one way of managing it, but there are other things that you can interrogate too. But I think what has happened in my experience is that a lot of clinicians haven't seen me within that sort of, how can diagnosis help one part of this person's life? It's more so like, how can diagnosis, like they just put me into that sort of box, and then I'm just shipped off in that box, and there's nothing questioned outside of it. So I think like, yeah, there was definitely a point in my advocacy journey where I was part of like a group that said, you know, we should throw out diagnostic manuals and stuff like that. But I think that there is definitely strengths within that, but it is not at all the totality of our healing. There are lots of things outside of my healing that have helped that are not medical, that are not clinical at all. I think we need to be a lot more cognizant of that and know that mental health is not one size fits all. We cannot just be medicated and everything's fixed. That might work for some people, but definitely doesn't work for all of us. And I think being really cognizant that mental health is so individual, and we need to kind of see all the different options available and be able to choose those options and have autonomy within that is what's really, really important.
And what's your hope? Like, what do you advise for young people, or for the people now who might be listening to this and haven't got any help, or they've got unresolved issues? What should they actually do? What's some advice from you into what people should do if they want to start actually getting some help today?
Honestly, like if you're listening to this and you're struggling with whatever it might be, I firstly want to say, like, thank you for admitting it to yourself, because I think that that's a really hard step, is being real with yourself about what you're going through. I think the next thing is for me to tell you that you're not over-exaggerating and you're not too sensitive. You're not too much, and you're just enough the way that you are. But the key thing is that you're not alone in what you're going through. If you do want help, there is help available, and there are people that can walk you through that too. You don't have to seek help alone, because it is terrifying. It is a scary thing to go through, but being with other people makes it a lot less scary. And whether it be someone that you know or someone like me, if you want to shoot me a message, like that's totally fine. There are always people out there that are ready and available to help you and that understand. Like I might not have the exact same experiences as you, but someone will understand a part of your experiences. And you need to know that like, you're not crazy, no matter what you or anyone else tells you you are. Like I think that's something that I wish that I could say to my younger self, because I spent so much time thinking that I was everything that was wrong and that I didn't deserve help. Like I kind of knew that there was help available, but I was too scared to seek it, or I just thought that I wasn't good enough for it. And I think the key thing that changed for me was meeting someone that was really honest about who they were and said, like, you know, they're struggling too. Like maybe we can go through it together. And it's that sort of community that changed everything for me. So if you're struggling, like, please know that there are people out there that can help you. Help is always available, and you're never alone.
That's some great advice. That's what I'll just end with this one question as well. How have you gone, like you've achieved a lot. Like, I don't know how you managed to have time to do what you've done. Was there something where you spoke about it earlier, was about creativity, right? So you knew that you've got this creative side, and was there something where you just dove into your creativity and that's what's absorbed you and that's what's allowed you to sort of, let's say, progress, or is that sort of how you've managed to really do all the things you've done? Because I don't think I see what you've done. And as I said at the start, I advise everyone to go to your website and have a look, but it's quite amazing. So was that something where you've achieved that because of that element of you and you've just dove straight into the creativity and just let loose and you've gone on to achieve all these things?
Honestly, I feel like the creativity is just something that like I kind of had to do. It's kind of like breathing, I guess. Like if I can't be allowed to be creative, then yeah, I don't know. I feel really suffocated. I don't think I'd know how to express myself. I think a lot of the things that I've like, I feel like high achieving is something that I still sort of struggle with because I have, imposter syndrome in that regard. But I think the things that I've managed to achieve are because I've been really supported to get to those different points. And I think identifying what I'm passionate about and really being able to dedicate a lot of energy into that is, yeah, it's been really fulfilling. I think the main motivator for me most recently is knowing that I can help other people and making tangible change out of that. Like I definitely, studying and stuff like that, I was, quote unquote high achieving in school, but I definitely, I guess, didn't kick as many goals as I feel like I am right now. And I think the reason is that now I'm doing it for a purpose and I'm doing it for younger me, and for people that I'm helping right now. Like, I think that's the tangible change that I'm making. And it's what I feel like gives me a sense of purpose and makes me want to keep doing more. There's so much healing that I definitely don't claim that I'm not selfless completely. And I'm not like completely altruistic. Like I've gotten so much healing and journey from this as well. Like the conversations I have every day where I'm, in that quote unquote helper position, I'm getting that help from the other person as well. It's mutual. And I think that's what's really beautiful is about like conversations like you and I are having today. Like I've learned from you. I've appreciated the space that you've held for me. And I think this sort of communal healing is something that, I don't know, I never want to stop doing. There's no difference really for me between work and personal life. I can't believe that I'm doing the work that I am now, or it can really be called work. It feels natural. It feels like it's something that, I didn't know existed. Lived and living experiences, something I didn't know existed until like more recently. And I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
That's great to hear. I'm very happy for you. I was going to say so where can people find out more about yourself? I've obviously plugged your website already 20 times, but obviously, do you want to maybe talk about where they can find? Is there anything else you're working on, or what can they do to find out more about you?
Yeah, sure. Honestly, you can hit me up at my website. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm currently working on a series of a couple books actually at the moment. One of them is about multicultural mental health. And I'm looking for people who have multicultural experiences of mental health journeys and who want to speak a bit more about that. Because I feel like a lot of the kind of discourse around multicultural mental health is about like people speaking about us, but not us speaking for ourselves. So I'm just putting together a collection of stories. So if you want to be involved in that, let me know. But otherwise, I'm also making a origami book about endangered Australian animals, which is kind of odd. But yeah, if you want to get a copy of that, let me know as well. But honestly, I can't promise what I'll be doing in a year's time. It's pretty eclectic. But if you ever want to get in touch, I'm always open to conversations. And yeah, I love chatting about these types of things. So I'm very appreciative of your time today, Joel.
No, I'm very appreciative of yours. And it's very, very been a great discussion. And to have someone as passionate about yourself and has achieved so much, it's really good. And looking forward to following your journey and seeing what you achieve in the future. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Likewise.
Thank you very much.